Hi, I'm Pastor Dennis Carey, and I want to say welcome to Insight. In today's broadcast, I want to talk about the 7 principles to victory. I want to share with you one of my favorite Bible stories of all time, something that's used even today in sports analogies when you have a clear-cut advantage with one over another. I want to talk to you just for a few minutes about the story of David and Goliath. We find that in 1 Samuel chapter number 17. Old Testament, 1 Samuel chapter number 17. Why don't you do this? Why don't you take a second, grab your Bible, and join me as we're going to start in verse number 20. 1 Samuel chapter number 17, verse number 20. I'm going to lay a little bit of a foundation here. I'm going to go through several different scriptures, but I'm going to take a few minutes to stop and point out a few things that are relevant not only to the story, but it's also principles to victory. Verse number 20 reads, "So David arose early in the morning and left the flock with the keeper and took the supplies and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the circle of the camp while the army was going out in battle array, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up in the battle array, army against army. Then David left his baggage in the care of the baggage keeper, and he ran to the battle line and entered in order to greet his brothers. And he was talking with them. Behold, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, named Goliath, was coming up from the army of the Philistines, and he spake these same words, and David heard them. When all the men of Israel saw the man, they fled from him and were greatly afraid. The men of Israel said, Have you seen this man who is coming up? Surely he is coming up to defy Israel, and it will be that the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches, and will give him his daughter and make his father's house free from taxes in Israel." Let me just break down this story for you for just a minute, because what we find is that Israel came to do battle against their arch enemy, the Philistines. Rather than have all of the armies fight together, one is on one side of a valley, the other is on the other side of a valley. The champion of the Philistines comes out. Now, some theologians believe that Goliath is almost 9 feet tall. 9 feet tall. This man is a professional warrior. I don't know if you remember the days of Governor Schwarzenegger, in his days when he used to film movies like Conan the Barbarian, when he was all beefed up and he used to just look ripped. I know I'm dating myself just a little bit, but back in the days of Conan the Barbarian is when I like to picture, in my mind, that's what Goliath looked like. He was an intimidating force. He was a professional warrior, and he came out and challenged Israel with a very specific challenge. He said, in other words, send me the best guy for your entire country. There's no need for both of our armies to fight against each other, which will take days, maybe even weeks, maybe even months. He came out, laid his stuff down, and threw out a challenge. He said, I want your best guy. You send me your best warrior. If he beats me, our entire country will be slaves to you. If I beat him, your country will be slaves to us. Mano y mano, one-on-one. That's what he challenged Israel with. And as we read this story, you can hear the king is trying to find somebody who has some courage, who will face Goliath and take him down, right? This is where we find David. David runs out to greet his brothers. David wasn't even old enough to join the army yet. At this point in his life, most theologians believe he was a teenager, maybe 16, 17 years old. He wasn't even old enough to join the army. His elder brothers were in the army, 8 of them, I believe, 7 of them were in the army, and he went to check on them because his father asked him to check on him. He wasn't even supposed to be there. He was there checking on his brothers when he heard Goliath say these things and challenged the armies of Israel. As we pick this up in verse number 26, David spoke to the men who were standing by, saying, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should taunt the armies of the living God?" In other words, he's saying, what do I get if I beat this guy again? The man that beats Goliath, what does he get? He gets to marry the king's daughter, who was pretty hot, by the way, and no taxes. Think about this. No taxes for the entire family for the rest of their life. No taxes. I know some folks watching right now are thinking, I would sign up for that deal, right? This is what David is experiencing, and he wants to know, is it in writing? Who has this written down? Does somebody have that in writing? Because he's starting to feel pretty fired up about facing Goliath. Verse number 27, the people answered him in according with the word, saying, thus it will be done for him. Verse 28, Eliab, his oldest brother, spoke to the men. He got mad at David in verse number 28 and told David to go back home and tend the sheep. Verse number 29, David said, "What's it to you? I just want to stick around for a little while." Verse number 30, then he turned away from him, and another one said the same thing. Verse number 31, then the words which David spoke were heard. They told them to Saul, and he sent for him. Somebody went and told the king, who is Saul, that there's a kid out here who keeps asking about the written guarantee if they beat Goliath. The king says, bring this guy to me. I want to meet him, right? That's what we read in verse number 32. David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail on account of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Now think about this. Here comes a kid who's never been in the army before, never been through boot camp, never had basic training, and he's telling the king, don't worry, I'll handle this. I'll go beat the champion of the Philistines. Verse number 33, then Saul said to David, you are not able to go up against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, while he has been a warrior from his youth. This guy has done nothing but train to fight for his entire life. A lopsided contest if there ever was one. This guy is a 9 foot tall, Conan the Barbarian looking dude, and he is a professional warrior. In walks David, who still smells like sheep because he's a sheep herder, and he is the guy who says, I'll take the challenge. David said to Saul in verse number 34, this is very important now, verse number 34, David said to Saul, your servant was tending his father's sheep when the lion and a bear came and took a lamb from the flock. I went after him and attacked him and rescued it from his mouth. And when he arose up against me, I seized him by his beard. I struck him and I killed him. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this Philistine will be like one of them, since he has taunted the armies of the living God. And David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the mouth of the bear, he will deliver me from the hands of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and may the Lord be with you. Can you imagine that? He says to David, David's story must have been pretty convincing. Because if David loses, you understand, all of Israel is supposed to be servant or slave to the Philistines. He must have a pretty compelling story right here, because he convinces the king that he is able to go and fight this Philistine. What is he doing? He's rehearsing the victories that he's already had. He's rehearsing the things that God has already delivered him from.